Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Anthony Cacace versus Leigh Wood fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into this. So of course this is for the IBO World Super Featherweight title, and yes, that isn't a major sanctioning body in which is a major world title that everybody is well recognized with, but it could have been for the IBF title. And of course Cacace had the IBF title and he won it. I believe he won it when he fought Joe Cordina, and that was an excellent victory for himself. But he defended it against Josh Warrington and then he let it go. And it's a little bit surprising that he vacated it, and I suppose it's interesting to see. I feel like perhaps there was some promotional behind the scenes conversations that probably happened as to why he decided to let go of the title and fight Leigh Wood for a lesser known IBF world title instead, because I feel like this fight was always bound to have some sort of world title on, and kind of had to have some sort of world title on because of course Leigh Wood, he was a world champion himself at featherweight, and he then is now moving up to the super featherweight division. And of course Cacace also was the IBF world champion, and so on paper this is two world champions going up against each other. So like I say, it needed to have some sort of world championship on the line, but there probably was, something ordered with the IBF. There's no surprise that the IBF like to order their mandatories quite quickly after the fighter, fights. And it's not really something that I agree with, and it's not really something that a lot of boxing fans agree with either, because they do order it just so quickly. But I suppose at the same time, Nunez definitely did deserve his shot at a world title, and he definitely worked hard enough to deserve that shot. But at least now we have this contest, which is going to be a great British contest in which is a true 50-50 matchup. And to be fair, I've mentioned this a few times in my videos, there is a need for very good 50-50 English matchups to be on English shows and to not just be on Riyadh season shows, because they are amazing cars, amazing shows, but the true, British boxing fights, they should be in England. And we've just seen that, of course, with Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, where, we've had two great, English fighters fight each other, and it's ended up being a great fight, and it sold so well in England, where, it showcased that British boxing is still in a great position, and there is still, a desire from fans to watch big fights. And so hopefully this fight sells well. It's not in the desired location in which Leigh Wood has been campaigning for, and it's definitely interesting to see that, first of all, I mean, it came as quite a surprise to me that he had signed with Queensbury. They're throwing him straight into a very tough contest against Cacace, and I mean, if he loses that fight, will he go back to Matchroom? Is there some sort of contractual agreement where, he has a set fight deal? I'm not entirely sure what would happen. So, it is interesting to see. Like I say, he's moving up in weight, not fought for a long time, and he's getting thrown straight into such a tough contest. But you got to give him credit for that. And Queensbury, since coming to the zone, they've been wanting to kind of up the level of their shows and have more great names on their shows. And this has got some good recognizable British names on the undercard as well, and some good matchups, which I'm not going to talk about too much, but it is a very good undercard as well. But their first show in which they had on with Queensbury and DAZN it didn't really live up to the expectations, just because of a lot of injuries and pullouts and things like that, which just meant that the show wasn't what everybody was hoping it to be. But now they have this show, which is, like I say, a very good main event with a good undercard as well. And like I say, going back to speak about this not being the dream location that Leigh was campaigning for, when he beat Josh Warrington, there was, loads of conversations before that fight was even made about Leigh Wood fighting at the Nottingham Forest Stadium. Then obviously there was some contractual agreements and some, difficulties to make it work and everything like that. And, I think due to, if you know football, Nottingham Forest has had a lot of success recently. That's probably also hindered the fact of, them being willing to lend out their ground for a boxing event. Maybe that's played a factor, but also, like I say, he then was campaigning for, after the Josh Warrington fight, for him to be able to fight at the Nottingham Forest Stadium, and obviously, again, that struggled to happen. And also at the same time, it seemed like Matchroom wasn't really too eager to give him too many matchups or too many fights, which was, maybe a little bit unfair. I was hearing rumours that he was going to fight Navarrete on a big Riyadh season show. That didn't really come to anything. So, yeah, it was intriguing to see the fact that we just not seen him fight for ages. And then, yeah, he suddenly popped up in this fight here, which, yes, isn't at the Nottingham Forest Stadium. And to be fair, they might be running out of time for Leigh Wood to fight at Nottingham Forest Stadium. How many big matchups has he got left in his career? We're not entirely sure, because his fights are always so dramatic and so entertaining, but how many more of them can you have in your career before, you kind of run your course, or something doesn't go your way, and, you don't get the, look at the draw, or the, the good shot or anything like that, because we've got to look back upon his last fight versus Josh Warrington. Unlike the Cacace win last time out against Josh Warrington, Cacace was definitely more dominating, and yes, it was a decision. He wasn't able to knock him out, but he was able to have a lot more success. Warrington did well to showcase that he did still have a chin, and he did still have that warrior spirit about him. But, Leigh Wood, when he fought Josh Warrington was winning that fight for the most part, and he was making it tough for Leigh Wood, and he was, being that physical presence. And yes, you could argue that Leigh Wood had struggled going down to the featherweight division, and maybe that weight cut was physically a reason as to why he was struggling to deal with that physicality of Josh Warrington. But at the same time, he was getting caught with a lot of shots, and he defensively wasn't on his game that well. He wasn't looking as sharp, and, until he got the shock knockout, it perhaps wasn't all going in his favour. And this was against a Josh Warrington that definitely wasn't on the best of runs of form. He'd been coming off a knockout defeat before that. So it was interesting to see that fight, and we could have definitely seen a rematch. I mean, there was a lot of expectations that we would have seen a rematch, because they were still going back and forth, and there seemingly was a bit more spite between the two of them, just going back and forth on Twitter and Instagram after the fight had even happened. So, it was building for a nice rematch there, but obviously, things run its course. We saw Cacace instead fight Warrington, and we saw Leigh Wood, kind of fade into the background for a little bit, and, like I say, not really get too many matchups, not really be talked about too much. And it's a shame, because, like I say, yes, his fights are dramatic, and yes, that might not always run for him having a really long career, but they're entertaining, and you can't disagree with that. I mean, the Conlon fight was a fight of the year. The two Lara fights were both very dramatic as well. The Warrington fight was still an excellent fight, in a fan's perspective. And to be fair, this one has all the makings to be a great contest as well. So I'm surprised that there wasn't a more desire from the fans to really see Leigh Wood come back, because, Nottingham have been starved of a really good world championship fighter who's been representing them for a long time, and, since Carl Froch. So Leigh Wood came and he was doing that, and he was the poster boy of Nottingham to an extent. And, it's a good fighting city, and the fact that we're seeing other fighting cities such as Birmingham and Sheffield having so much success at the moment in England, it was nice to see that we also had a guy from Nottingham, representing there as well. And, now he's back. He's in a very good matchup here against Cacace, who, Cacace himself has been on a great story and a great run, to be fair to him. Before the fight with Cordina, he was IBO champion, I believe, as well. And so, he'd had a few good fights. He was coming off quite a good win, but it wasn't anything too crazy. He wasn't really noticed by the public too much just yet, and he was still kind of seen as just a contender who was possibly never really going to make it to the big opportunities, and perhaps wasn't quite deserving of a big opportunity and a big shot. So when he did get the fight versus Cordina, it did come as a bit of a surprise, because, like I say, Cordina was on a great run. He was world champion. He wasn't far off coming off the knockout performance against Agawa. He'd had some good fights versus Rachmanov, and so he was, looking good, and he was looking like, he was by far the favourite when he fought Cacace, and it was expected to be, an easier fight for Joe Cordina. Obviously, the way that the fight played out was interesting. Cacace caught Joe Cordina with a shot that was technically an illegal blow due to the ref, calling a time and Cacace threw afterwards. But you also got to blame the ref for not jumping in and getting involved and stopping the punch from landing, because he was just too relaxed and he didn't take the initiative needed to be able to, stop the punch from being thrown. But he then, it still went quite a few rounds afterwards. And yes, Cordina probably was suffering the effects for quite a long time after that punch, but it still went into I believe, the 8th round after that. So Cacace did very well to maintain the aggressive nature, and you could tell how fired up he was for that fight. And to be fair, he is a very strong physical fighter, but he's not really known for having crazy power, unlike somebody like a Leigh Wood, who, I mean, we've seen versus Lara, has that one punch knockout ability. He doesn't really seem to have that, but he can just wear you down, and he will throw everywhere. He is aggressive, he is physical, and that's, again, another thing that makes him entertaining. And like I say, this will be, from what I believe, a very, very good contest. It has all the makings to be a very entertaining fight. And so who do I think is going to win? I think Anthony Cacace is going to be able to win via TKO in round 12. I think he's going to be able to retain his IBO world title. I think he's going to be able to prove that he can go into the later rounds. And yes, Leigh Wood is so known for being able to really come alive into the later rounds. I think Cacace is going to be the stronger guy, and I think Leigh Wood, yes, he was really cutting a lot to get to the featherweight division, but it will be interesting to see how his power carries into this division. But I also think Cacace has got a very good chin. Maybe it hasn't been tested enough. I'm not into, I can't comment on that just yet, but I trust his chin. Like I say, I trust his physicality. I trust his mindset. You can see, like I say, the aggressiveness in his eyes when he's throwing. I think he's going to be able to rug it out. I think it's going to be a back and forth contest. Perhaps there might be minimal technique in there at times, but I inevitably do think that Cacace, like I say, is going to be able to stop him in the final round and end what will be, in my opinion, a very dramatic contest. Then who he can go on to fight next, after this would be a great fight. Possibly, if it's a good enough fight, then I'd probably be up for seeing a rematch. But, of course, he could then try and go on for a contest at the winner of Nunes versus Rikishi. Like I say, of course, that is for the IBF title, and, Matchroom are promoting that. Perhaps that could still happen. Maybe Cacace can get himself in line to be ordered. I don't know if the IBF will order it because he just vacated, but still maybe. So that could be an excellent fight as well. I think Nunes Cacace could be a great fight. Hernandez, again, is another aggressive, power punching, all action type of fighter who, again, like I say, could be a great fight. Or, like I talked about before, Leigh Wood was possibly rumoured to fight Navarrete at one point, so maybe the winner of Navarrete versus Suarez, which is, of course, for the WBO title, which is also happening this weekend as well. That could be another good contest as well. I think there is lots of great contests there to be had for Anthony Cacace if he can get through this one. I think this is the fight in which he needs to really bring the fans on his side, and then possibly he could go on to have a really big Irish fight, a bit of a homecoming type fight, to perhaps reclaim a world title of his, or just keep his IBO world title and bring a lot more fans and really create that more of a fan base next time out, like I say, if he gets through this. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you are new, and thanks for watching.